some really bad things can happen. And you know what's really remarkable for Americans to think about this? 20 years ago, back in 2008, before the shale revolution took place, Europe and America actually imported a similar amount of energy. And you see the path that Europe went down. America, thank goodness, found itself in a position where it was energy dependent, but we could do something about it. And the only difference between Europe and America is American shale. Because in 2008, we cracked the code on shale and transformed America from being energy dependent to being energy powerhouse on the world stage. American shale was the reason for that. The American wildcat, the American roughneck made that happen. We are currently producing now in this country, when you add up the oil and the gas together, over 30 million barrels a day of energy equivalent.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, my name is David Fromm, and I'm the new host of the American Potential podcast. I say the new host because Jeff Crank ran for Congress and won. So he's now representing the people of Colorado's 5th Congressional District. And with a new Congress and the Trump administration, energy policy will shift from restricting energy production to prioritizing energy independence and energy abundance, reducing regulatory barriers and encouraging domestic energy production. By tapping into America's vast reserves of natural gas, coal, and oil, the administration aims to lower energy costs for families, create jobs, and lower the cost of goods. Today's guest is an energy leader and has been at the forefront of America's natural gas revolution. Under his leadership, EQT Corporation has become the largest producer of natural gas in the United States, championing innovation and efficiency to harness the abundant energy resources of our nation. With this understanding of the energy industry and a commitment to advancing American energy independence, our guest understands what unleashing domestic energy production would do for America. I want to welcome Toby Rice, who is the CEO of EQT Corporation, to the podcast. Welcome, Toby.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thanks. Hey, before we get started, maybe tell everybody, just fun fact about yourself or something interesting.
Yeah, I think one thing that people are pretty surprised to learn about myself is that I did not grow up in Texas. I grew up in Massachusetts, which is, there's oil and gas production in 38 out of the 50 states. Massachusetts,
Really?
Unfortunately, is not one of them. So, before I got into the oil and gas business, I was sweeping chimneys. And, it's been a wild ride. That was over 20 years ago. But it's been quite a transition from there to where we're sitting today.
Yeah, no kidding. That is quite a ride. I mean, being sweeping chimneys, if my memory serves me correctly, you worked as a roughneck down in Texas, getting your start in the oil industry.
That's right. My first, I went from sweeping chimneys to working as a roughneck floor hand on a workover rig. And for people that aren't too familiar with the hierarchy in the oil field, that's about as close to the bottom of the totem pole as you can get. I was making $9 an hour with a $2 an hour safety pay if everybody works safely. So, we started in the field and have worked our way up, but because of that experience, we have a tremendous amount of respect for the people in the field. And at EQT, a big part of our culture is centered around a saying, respect the wrench. Everything we do should be setting our teams in the field up for success.
Yeah, one of the things our company embraces is bottom-up solutions and a bottom-up approach. And from what I can tell about the company that you and your brothers have, it really seems to reflect that. Tell me about what that experience and then your engagement with folks who are out in the field, how does that inform how you run your company?
Yeah, we have a really unique perspective. I mean, the brothers, when I moved from roughnecking, we were fortunate enough to have some investment from our father, who is now looking back, absolutely crazy decision on his part to start an oil and gas company with his sons that really had no experience in oil and gas. But in 2007, we got started and we built Rice Energy, 3 brothers starting in an apartment out of Pittsburgh. In over 10 years, we grew this business brick by brick into ultimately a top 10 producer of natural gas in the country. What's really important, I think, about that whole experience, from the startup phase to, I'd say, a large public company, is we were forced to learn every single corner of this business. And that gave us a pretty unique perspective on what each group does, what the inputs are, what the outputs are, and how they all interrelate. And I think that's an incredibly valuable skill to manage a business at scale, because I think we've all worked with big companies before, and it seems the bigger they get, the more the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. That is something that I recognized early on and vowed to myself that we were never going to have a business that had that lack of communication. So, and for us, that really summarizes to making holistic decisions. And when you start with what this business is all about, setting our guys up in the field to knock it out of the park, we can make holistic decisions across the business that really continue to allow us to make the energy we produce cheaper, more reliable, and cleaner. And that is what every employee at EQT wakes up thinking about, is how we can make the energy we produce cheaper, more reliable, and cleaner, for our customers here in America and also around the world.
Well, for listeners who maybe haven't heard of EQT, it's one of the leaders in natural gas industry. Can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Sure. Company was founded back in 1888, and it's been a part of many energy transitions. Started developing shale when the Marcellus really took off. I'd say probably 2005. Now, during that period of time is when me and the brothers were starting Rice Energy, and our business, we opened shop in 2007. Over the next 10 years, we grew our business to a top 10 producer of natural gas in the country. And in 2017, we made the decision to merge or sell our business to EQT. Putting both asset bases together would allow us to drill, 12,000 foot laterals, not just drilling 8,000 foot laterals. The lateral length is one of the biggest factors in driving the economics of your project. So this is really a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. And the combination of Rice Energy and EQT is what made EQT America's largest natural gas producer. And so how did I get involved? I was a large shareholder, rooting for EQT. Unfortunately, EQT had a little rough patch in 2018. They blew their budget by a few $100 million. Shareholders got spooked. They called me and asked me to get back involved in the company. And when I offered my services, I was politely declined. And so we had to do a proxy contest to wrestle control of EQT. And after a 9-month, slugfest, in July of 2019, 80% of the shareholders voted to approve our slate of directors. They made me CEO. And that really has been, the transformation that EQT has gone through over the last 5 years. That was a really clear point. What we've done the last 5 years, just to give you some perspective, we've increased our productive capacity by 50%. We've lowered our cost structure by 30%. And we've doubled our free cash flow per share, the profitability of our business. And also, we've made our energy cleaner. We are the first natural gas or I'd say fossil company of scale that has reached net zero on a scope 1 and 2 basis. So it's been a tremendous transformation. And most recently, we did a transaction where we became vertically integrated. We bought our pipeline provider, which is Equitrans. And now, as part of that deal, we have a tremendous upstream business. We have a massive midstream business, and we also own Mountain Valley Pipeline, which was, I think, one of the most important pipelines built in this country, but it was the most controversial pipeline that was built. Remember, this pipeline required an act of Congress to get passed. It's sort of a symbol of all the crazy things that have happened in this industry over the last few years. We got some really interesting stories about the challenges that went through getting pipelines built in this country.
Well, you've been kind of, I think of you as like an evangelist for natural gas and really American energy production. What are some of the myths about natural gas that some people might have that you think are misplaced?
Well, the biggest one, and the reason why we believe is the root cause behind all of the pressure against our industry today, is that all fossil fuels are the cause for all the problems in this world, specifically as it relates to climate change. We think that a lot of the good things in this world, the technology, the freedom that we enjoy, are direct results of the products that we produce. With natural gas, I'd say it's even more remarkable. People think that natural gas is adding to the emissions. Actually, natural gas is the biggest decarbonizing force on our planet.
Really?
The United States is leading the world in lowering its emissions, and over 60% of that progress came from doing one thing: replacing coal with natural gas. And then when you step back and you look at this opportunity on the world stage, if you care about emissions, over half of the world's global emissions come from coal. And now with America and its LNG industry, which we've grown to be the largest in the world, we now have the natural gas resources and the vehicle to get that natural gas around the world to replace the biggest source of emissions on the planet, which is foreign coal. And that's our Unleash US LNG campaign. But it was really centered around the fact that people have been blocking pipelines because of their concern for the environment. When you step back and realize natural gas is a decarbonizing force, you should be supporting natural gas pipelines because of your concern for the environment. So that's always a challenge when you feel like people have it 180 degrees backwards. But you look at the state of the world that we're in right now, and a lot of people are waking up to the fact that we need to question a lot of the bizarre policies that have been put in place over the last few years and get back to doing things that work. And what works is American energy.
So I know you're in Europe over the last year talking to the EU. What's the reaction there to what your message about natural gas?
Yeah, so for people that haven't been paying attention pretty closely, Europe found themselves in a very precarious situation back in 2021, 2022, when Russia dropped bombs in Ukraine and yanked gas supply from Europe. And that sent Europe into a economic crisis, and not just an economic crisis. I mean, people were concerned about, millions of people freezing to death. Just to explain how tough a situation this is for Europe, I mean, Europe, simply put, lost their energy security. They made a massive move towards intermittent energy solutions like wind and solar. They had the world leader when you think about renewables penetration. It was in Europe. And they stopped developing their own resources and instead handed the keys to Putin, who supplied over 40% of their natural gas. As you can imagine, their energy security was crippled when the bombs were dropped in Ukraine. And just to give you, and energy prices went through the roof. Just to give you guys a perspective, Europe typically spends between around $200 billion for their energy needs. Mm-hmm. In 2022, because of their energy insecurity, the price tag associated with that, Europe spent almost $1 trillion on their energy bills.
Wow.
Okay, this is the price of if we get it wrong, some really bad things can happen. And you know what's really remarkable for Americans to think about this? 20 years ago, back in 2008, before the shale revolution took place, Europe and America actually imported a similar amount of energy. And you see the path that Europe went down. America, thank goodness, found itself in a position where it was energy dependent, but we could do something about it. And the only difference between Europe and America is American shale. Because in 2008, we cracked the code on shale and transformed America from being energy dependent to being energy powerhouse on the world stage. American shale was the reason for that. The American wildcat, the American roughneck made that happen. We are currently producing now in this country, when you add up the oil and the gas together, over 30 million barrels a day of energy equivalent. That's more than Russia and Saudi Arabia combined.
Wow.
Just think about how amazing this was. But if you understood the history, you would cherish this industry a little bit more, because unfortunately we find ourselves in a world today where maybe our industry is taken for granted a little bit. And the amount of opposition against our industry has been incredible. It's never been more important time for us to produce energy in this country than right now, whether that's helping our allies in Europe through LNG, whether it's meeting this AI revolution that's taking place and the massive power demand that's going to take place, whether it's reducing the energy bills from the 60% of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck. It's never been more important, but it's also never been more difficult. It takes an act of Congress to get a pipeline built in this country. That's absolutely ridiculous. For the people that that may be happy to see the pressure against our industry and the challenge in infrastructure build, I've got news for you. If you think it's hard to build a pipeline, try building a transmission line. If you think it's hard to get an oil and gas location built, try building a 5,000 acre solar or wind facility. The reality is this: doesn't matter what type of energy you're trying to produce in this country, it's never been a more difficult time. And it's really scary because energy bills for Americans are up 35% over the last 4 years. And you look at the energy security of our allies being crippled, global emissions still skyrocketing. There's all these reasons where we should be looking at what we're doing, saying we need to be doing more, not less. We need to make it easier, not harder. But hopefully we see some signs of hope on the horizon.
Well, so the country, had a decision a few months ago, and President Trump's is coming into office. And I think you characterized one of the choices when it came to American energy, that we had a choice of leadership that tolerates American energy production and one that unleashes it. What do you see? What was your experience running a big energy company in America over the last 4 years? And then what are you hopeful about in the future?
I'd say there's just been a ton of pressure. It should not take an act of Congress to get a pipeline built in this country.
Yeah.
And, we've been saying how hard it is to get energy produced. And one of the reactions that you get a couple reactions. The first one is people say, Toby, you got to stop crying about how hard it is to get energy built in this country because, look at the facts, Toby. We're producing record amounts of energy in this country today, specifically oil and gas. So it can't be that hard. Well, look at the world around us and ask yourself this question: is it enough? Yes, we are producing over 30 million barrels a day of energy. We've never produced more energy than we're producing today. But energy security crippled, petro dictators wreaking havoc on the world, emissions still skyrocketing, and for the first time in 20 years, energy poverty in this world has increased. We need to be doing a whole heck of a lot more. Now, the other thing people will say is, okay, we hear you guys complaining about how hard it is to get energy built, but let's be honest. Energy executives have been crying about how hard it is in the regulations and the permitting. They've been crying about this ever since I can remember people developing energy in this country. And so some people look at the industry, and maybe with us, and they say, you guys are like the boy who's cried wolf. Well, here's what people need to understand. While there has been environmental opposition against our industry, it's never been at this level. We had concerns about hydraulic fracturing taking place when the shale revolution was taking off. But guess what? That did not stop our ability, and we transformed America, thank goodness, into being an energy powerhouse on the world stage. But what is different now, this pipeline cancellation movement that took place in this country over the last 8 years has absolutely devastated our ability to get energy from where it's produced to where it's consumed, and it's muted our ability to meet the demand. And so energy prices are increasing. And after 8 years of this pipeline cancellation movement, our pipelines are full. Our industrial capacities are maxed out. What I'm telling you is the wolf is here, and we need to get back to getting things built in this country. And while drill, baby, drill was the mantra that pushed us, propelled us to becoming an economic power when it comes to leveraging energy, the new mantra to get us out of this is not about drilling. It's about build, baby, build. And we got to get back to getting the infrastructure built that can get this energy from where it's produced to where it's needed, so we can lower the energy bills for Americans, lower global emissions, and make the world a more peaceful, prosperous place.
So what would you like to see the Trump administration and Congress do specifically to get back to building?
Well, it's very simple. The root cause of all these issues that we get in, everybody's scratching their head and saying, how do we find ourselves in this place? Why are energy bills up 35% for Americans when we've never produced more energy in this country? Why are people in Boston spending $20 for their natural gas when right next door is less than 300 miles away is the biggest gas field in the world, and I'm selling my gas in Pennsylvania for a price of $4? All these things that got you scratching your head is the root cause of this is really simple. Political force has overwhelmed market forces. It's that simple. We need to fix this. We need to get back to a place where we let market forces drive the cheapest, most reliable, cleanest energy to the marketplace. And that simply means let the markets work. We have over 7 BCF a day, which is equivalent to 7% of the country's natural gas volumes. There were pipeline projects proposed, but those have been blocked, canceled, and opposed over the last 8 years. Let's get those and breathe life back into those projects. It's as simple as letting the market work. That means we're going to need to have regulatory reform. Specifically, we need to make sure that we minimize we need litigation reform. That's going to be one of the biggest road challenges that the environmentalists have been using. But letting markets work is one thing. If people really want to make a difference, and if we want to recognize the fact that we are one event away from having our own crisis, if we want to protect the 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, and we want to prevent them from having to go through an energy crisis, we need to move quick. And to move quick, we need to move from just letting the market work to incentivizing the market. And while we've seen a lot of incentives at play when it comes to energy, primarily focused on the environmental benefits of energy, what are we doing to incentivize the reliability of our energy systems? And that is a huge opportunity that has been ignored over the last, call it 8 years. We've ramped up our renewables. Now it's time for us to ramp up our reliables. And there are tremendous opportunities to bring more reliability to our energy systems. What does that mean? It's real simple. Increase the industrial capacity of the industry that we want to see. If that's power, that means build more power plants. It's not a bad thing to have underutilized power plants. Let's stop redlining our equipment. And the other element of reliability is stockpiling the energy that's needed to run the machines. And for natural gas, that means more natural gas storage, more pipelines to deliver, and more bigger machines to do the industrial work that needs to get done.
So a lot of us have been talking about AI and how exciting it is, or scary, depending where you're at. I think one of the hidden things, or maybe certainly not hidden to anybody in the energy sector, is how it's skyrocketing the demand for energy. What are you seeing in that regard? And then also, you did mention, could there ever be an energy crisis in America? How do you think that would come about? I assume it's because of where we're choking off due to a lack of infrastructure, but maybe take us through how that might come about and what the warning signs would be.
Yeah, it could be as simple as, let's talk about the crisis for a second. Could be a winter storm. Could be as simple as that. It could be a geopolitical event, which we've seen major issues that are taking place. And, just step back and just look over the last 4 years. These are going to be things that we don't see coming. Well, weather is something that we should be planned for. But, just look back the last 4 years. COVID, the Russia-Ukraine situation. These are major things that completely change the way the world works. Then you bring in AI, and I imagine that AI is not just going to be sunshines and rainbows. That could potentially bring on some negative things. Like, we should be doing everything we can to beef up our security, specifically our energy security, to prevent any type of issue from hurting Americans and our allies. So, it's not a good sign when utility companies from New England are sending letters to President Biden and saying, "Hey, Prez, I don't think we can make it through a winter. We need some help with these pipelines." We're seeing people already raising their hands and calling out these issues. It's time to act. On the environmental front, on the AI front, what's really interesting, AI and meeting these power demand needs, some people are saying are really going to bring this reliability issue to a head and make us really get serious. I've heard some people describe adding AI onto this strained grid as being the straw that breaks the camel's back. I would actually say adding AI to this grid is going to be the log that breaks the camel's back. I mean, this is a major league demand load. And for Americans really don't appreciate that in the United States, we haven't seen base demand load increase in this country. We've seen a ton of windmills going up. We've seen a ton of natural gas getting built. But what you didn't see is we've been ripping out nuclear, ripping out coal, and we've been ripping out the reliables and replacing them with the renewables. That has left our grid in a very fragile state. Now, AI, how big is it? How big could this be? You know, our estimate is we could see over 45 gigawatts of new power demand needed. That would be over 10% of what the grid currently does on average today across the U.S.
Wow.
That number is make-believe for a lot of people, but 45 gigawatts is the electricity needed to power 9 New York cities. I mean, just think about that. It is an absolute massive opportunity and challenge, probably bigger on the challenge than the opportunity where people's focus are right now. And the question is, what's going to service this load? I think people are starting to come to the realization natural gas is going to play the leading role in meeting the affordability needs, but specifically the reliable energy needs and clean energy needs that's going to be needed for this power.
So as we come to a close, you've been pretty vocal about the need for America and policymakers in particular to get serious about meeting these demands, you know, unleashing American energy, particularly focusing on infrastructure. Tell me something you're hopeful about with the Trump administration coming in.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm hopeful about with all of our leaders in D.C. And we've done dozens and dozens of trips up there to D.C. We've met with hundreds of our leaders from Congress to the Senate to positions in the administration. And I will tell you this, you know, when you look at the political landscape right now, it's very easy to see the divisiveness. But what makes me hopeful is that our leaders in D.C., left or right, we all want the same thing. Every single politician I've met wants more affordable energy. They want more reliable energy. They want cleaner energy. So that's where we're starting. Now, somehow we start there and it gets crazy. But at the root of our desires is to build the energy systems that are cheaper, more reliable, and cleaner. Our job in industry is to provide the solutions that achieve those objectives. That's why we've been vocal with our Unleash US LNG campaign. You know, the American people need to understand the potential we have in the United States. We have the natural gas resource, thanks to the shale revolution, that would allow us to increase natural gas production by over 50%. And have a surplus of 60 BCF a day of natural gas to feed LNG or domestic power demand or domestic manufacturing onshoring. Now, 60 BCF a day is another one of those make-believe numbers that people can't get their heads wrapped around or know what it means. 60 BCF a day is the energy equivalent of adding 10 million barrels a day to the world stage. What I'm telling you is that's equivalent to we have an untapped Saudi Arabia worth of natural gas that we can bring to the surface, bring energy security to Americans, bring energy security to our allies around the world. Oh, and when we do this, it's going to be the biggest green initiative on the planet. We are really excited about President Trump and his understanding and how important this opportunity is and how American energy security is American security, period. And the opportunity this can bring tremendous amounts of peace and prosperity on the world stage and also be a tremendous growth engine for America. You know, we are very excited about President Trump and his ability to understand how big this opportunity is and also understand markets and understanding how important it is to let markets work.
Yeah, well, I will say, you know, you as a Pennsylvanian, you all did your part sending a good guy like Dave McCormick to the Senate. We certainly appreciate all that you guys did to do that because he's a good one.
Well, listen, we're excited about Dave, and I'll tell you, Senator Fetterman also gets it, understands how important American energy is, not only to the global environmental perspective, but also understands how important it is for our roughnecks, for our pipeliners, to creating jobs. So we've got two great senators on this issue, and we are really excited about working with them to make sure these great opportunities get brought to life.
Well, there's big challenges ahead, and you've been really articulate, kind of spreading that word. Hopefully, new leadership's going to really help us to address that. But I really appreciate that we have leaders like you running these companies to try to help address these needs, these big challenges in front of us. So, Toby, thanks so much for joining us. It's been fascinating. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks. Folks, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Get out there and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.